What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Swish Life Garage. Today, guys, I'm back with the EG Coupe. Now, if you guys saw my last video, I found out on this car that the engine timing is off. So today I'm going to be taking care of that. I'm going to be taking off the timing belt, making sure that the cam and crank are on time, and hopefully get this thing running right. Now, I have already made a video on doing the timing for the D16 and doing the valve lash. So I'm going to try to speed up through this video. I'm still going to show you guys how to do it, but just going a little bit quicker on this motor. Now, the one I showed you guys previous was a D16Y8, and this is a D16Z6. So it's just slightly different, but for the most part everything is pretty much going to be the same. Really, the only difference is going to be that the cam gear here has different marks for it. So you have these two marks that are supposed to be level with the head, and then the third mark that's going to line up in the bottom with this plastic pointer here. And so you have three different marks instead of having an up arrow and the side mark. Honestly, I think that's pretty much going to be the only difference on this motor, but I'm going to get to it anyways, show you guys how to do it. First thing I'm going to do is loosen up this wheel, jack this car on up, get it on a jack stand, make sure it's safe, and take the wheel off. Now I have access to the crank here. First thing I'm going to do is work on getting the belt off for the power steering and the one for the AC alternator. Since this motor doesn't have the upper timing cover on here, I don't necessarily have to take off the valve cover to do the timing belt, which makes it a tiny bit easier. First belt I'm going to work on is getting the power steering off. Have this wing nut here for the adjustment, but have these two bolts back here which I have to loosen up, and I'm going to take them completely off just so I can move the whole power steering pump. I just noticed that this motor doesn't have the belt for the AC on there, so I don't got to worry about that. But the next belt I got to take off is for the alternator, and I got to loosen up the 12 over here. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a 14, and then there's going to be another nut. I'm going to work on getting this crank off. I'm going to get my crank tool, get a breaker bar, make sure it's locked in, and then get the socket on the crank and break that one loose. That was not tight at all. I want to show you guys what I found here on the crank. Look right here. It's kind of like all chewed up on the inside. That inner lip right there. It's supposed to have all those little lines on there, but it looks like this crank might have gotten stuck, might have gotten rusted before. I'm not sure. And also, the hole for the key is damaged, which this crank honestly still probably would work, but check this out, man. Here's the key. It's not even a key, it's just something, that piece of metal that someone grinded up. On the actual crank, you can see it's been damaged as well where the key goes in, but for the most part it should be fine. Honestly, it's just slightly opened up. Once I take everything off, I'll take a further look. Next thing I'm going to be taking off is taking off this idler pulley. That's the tensioner for the AC belt. It's going to have a 12 in the front, and as well have some 12s on the bracket. I believe it's two, one right there and then another one lower. This is what I took off. It actually is a 14 in the front, and the two on the bracket are going to be a 12. This idler pulley is pretty locked up. Well, it spins, but it doesn't really spin too free. Things are freed up in here, and I'll be able to get this lower timing cover off. Usually, if you're going to be taking the timing belt completely off and putting a new one on, you're going to have to take off this motor mount and support the engine from underneath. Since I just need to correct the timing, I'm not going to be doing that. This cover only had 2 bolts holding it on, one down here which was super tight, and then one up here which was loose. Now I'm gonna loosen up the timing belt, loosen up the tensioner. Right there is gonna be a 14. Took time to clean up some of the parts. They look a whole lot better. Found one extra bolt I have for the timing cover. Was looking at the bolt for the tensioner. I noticed that it's messed up. The threads are like stripped. So I'm gonna try to see how it looks inside of the motor where this bolts into. I did get another bolt here that I have laying around. I'm going to use this one instead. I'm going to try to go in that hole and clean up the threads. Also, I took a key from another D16z6 that I have, and I'm going to use it on this motor. As far as the crank and the crankshaft, I think it's fine. As far as the damage that's on there, I think as long as it has the key and it's bolted down right. I think what had happened, the crank probably wasn't bolted down tight enough. They ran the engine and the crank got loose, and that's how the damage happened there. I'm just guessing. This motor isn't an interference motor, so it really can't do any damage to the valves. I got all the pieces of aluminum out of there. I'm not going to use this bolt because the threads are just obviously messed up. This is trash. I also checked the key for the crank, and I'm very sure there's not going to be any issues with the harmonic balancer and the key. Even with that little bit of damage, it's really going to hold it in place. Even here, I can't even wiggle the key around. So if it's nice and tight, we could get on to putting the timing belt back on. The cam is on top dead center. The lines across are even with the head, and then that third line is lining up with that white pointer here. The crank, I have it on top dead center. There's a line on the crank gear. There's the line, and then there's going to be an arrow. That arrow right here, so that arrow has to line up with the line, and all that is good to go. So I'm going to loosely put on the tensioner and slide up the gear for the crank. Here's the tensioner, and there's the spring. It's going to go on just like that. I'm not going to put on the spring, just loosely put on the tensioner first. Alright, so I'm going to drop the belt on down. Going to put the belt around the crank first, and then I'm going to go up top, put it around the cam. So that's on. I'm going to get the spring and attach that to its little pivot. After I got the belt on, I got the tensioner. It has like a hole on the right side. You got to line it up with this pin, tighten up the tensioner so it doesn't come out of that pin that it has there. And then I put on the spring onto the pivot there. So now I'm going to put the crank on here and just turn it about 3 teeth. Just doing that tightens up this side of the belt and puts all the slack on the tensioner side. I'm going to tighten up the tensioner, but I'm going to try to put some force on the little arm on the left side here of the tensioner just to get a little bit extra tension. I'm going to put the crank on and just spin it a couple times, make sure everything's on top dead center. Everything's on top dead center. Here at the crank, it is on top dead center. I need to put this washer on here. Gotta take the key off. It goes right around here, and it has a certain way it goes on. It's going to be cupping the outside. It's kind of like this on its end, and it's going to be facing outwards. I could put the lower timing cover on. Gonna put the bracket on for the AC belt. I'm not gonna put the pulley on because it's bad. going to put on the crank, and I'm going to put the key right back on here. I need to put on the belt for the alternator now. The only thing in the engine bay is putting on the power steering. I need to get this down. Everything's tightened up, and I did go over the crank as well. Again, since the crank is kind of damaged, I wanted to make sure to get that thing as tight as I can. I believe it's supposed to be at about 150 foot-pounds, but I just really got the breaker bar and really just tugged as hard as I can with the pipe on it, so I have confidence it's as tight as possible and that crank isn't going to move. I just want to make sure to cover all my ends. And with everything bolted up, I have turned the motor over just to make sure everything's still ending up on top dead center. So as you could tell, the cam is on top dead center, and down here in the crank, if you're able to see, the lines are matching up. If you guys had seen it previous before I fixed it, that line was probably about 3/4 of an inch over here. Since that's finished up, I'm going to take out the valve cover to do the valve lash. These gaskets right here, you could tell they didn't know how to put it on exactly, and they just kind of forced it on and ripped them up. On this other end, you can see a lot more what I'm talking about. It's just ripped up. Let me get on to the valve lash. I'm going to do it in order, starting with the #1 cylinder. As I've shown before, I'm just going to be turning the crank. So on the cam, top dead center, you do #1 cylinder, intake valves at 7/1000ths of an inch, and exhaust valves at 9/1000ths of an inch. After those are set, just turn the motor over. These lines from across each other should be facing up and down, and then you'll move on to #3 cylinder. After you finish that one, turn the crank over again. These lines are going to be flipped the other way, still facing sideways. Then you do the #4 cylinder, and after you finish it up, turn the crank over, and the lines are going to be facing up and down again, and you do the #2 cylinder. Then you'll be all finished up. But of course, the way you could tell the difference is with that third line down here where that one is located, so you don't get confused. Try to speed through this a little bit since I already have a video detailing on exactly how to do it. But I'm going to check the valve lash before I get started just to see how much tolerance there is, if it's off by a lot or a little bit, and then set it where it's supposed to be. These valves for #1 cylinder are just a tad bit loose, so let me go ahead and set them right. Turn the motor over, those two lines are up and down, and that third line is facing right. This one, the intake is super tight and the exhaust is super loose. Motor turned, and now the lines are even with the head, with the third line on the top side. So now I'm able to do #4. The intake, one valve is super tight, one is super loose, and exhaust, these are loose. Final cylinder, turn the motor over, and the lines are facing up and down with the third line on the left. Now to do number 2 cylinder. So this one is loose, this one is loose, exhaust, these are loose. The valve lash is finished up. I am going to be throwing the valve cover back on, but I'm going to take out the spark plugs so I could do a compression test. I'm really not sure if this motor is the original motor for the car. Just judging on the appearance underneath the valve cover, looking here, I kind of want to say this engine might have 340,000 miles. But either way, miles doesn't really tell you the health of a motor. I'm just trying to get a general idea of how healthy it is. The battery had died. I got the spark plugs out. They're pretty new. Bosch double platinum spark plugs. I did take out the fuse for the ECU, the clock radio fuse, and I got the battery hooked up here. We have the compression tester in the number 1 cylinder, so we'll be able to see what it's looking like. This one is at about 125. Here we go for number 2. This one is about 170. Here we go, number 3. Number 3 is about 160. And number 4 is at 170. The timing is set correctly, which was the main thing, and now the valve lash is set to spec. As you heard, it started up right away. Everything is sounding good, but of course the real test is going to be whenever driving it to see if it's still low on power, but I'm very sure it was due to the engine timing. Before I put the wheel on and set this thing down, I do want to mess with the coilovers since this car is very low and over here there's a lot of potholes. So I'm going to be adjusting it. I'm going to loosen up this collar right here, and then from there you'll be able to turn the coil over. Right now the space in between here and here is about 1.5 inches, so I'm going to do an extra 1/2 inch and set it at 2 inches. For that I will be using a measuring tape, and I do have the spanner wrench for the collar. Just adjusting it for now so I can easily drive it around. I'll do some fine adjustment later on. This coilover is adjusted. I'm going to put on the wheel and get onto the front right. The car actually has lower control arms also, which I did not know, honestly. I'm going to set the back to another 1/2 inch as well, maybe just over 1/2 inch. This one is at 1 1/4. I'm going to set it to about 1 3/4. Got all the coilovers adjusted and the wheels are torqued down. This thing is ready for a test drive. It should be feeling a whole lot better. Let me get it jump started and I'll try to set you guys up inside. already feels better. Still need to set the ignition timing. I just couldn't do that just because I don't have a jumper wire. I will be doing that up next. One thing that I felt whenever driving the car is the brakes. They definitely need to be flushed out and put some new fluid in it. More than likely that's going to fix what I was feeling, but I did feel a little bit of shake in the steering wheel whenever braking, so more than likely it's going to be the rotors also. It would also need an alignment. I know when I bought the car, I believe the previous owner said that the coilovers only have like less than 100 miles on them. As the car sits right now, I like how the front sits. There's just a little bit of a finger gap to the fender and the tire. The rear sits a little bit lower, so I'm gonna have to raise that about another 1/4 inch. So whenever I do the brakes, I'm gonna get that adjusted also. I really got this car running pretty good, and it's almost ready to be a daily. Just a few more things, like I said, got to be done. Let me know down below if you guys have any comments about the timing or the valve lash on it, or just any comments about the car in general. Make sure you guys like this video and are subscribed to the channel, because you're definitely going to be seeing more videos on this coming up next. Check out my channel, check out some of the other videos, because I'm going to catch you on the next one, player.